record. Okay, so we're part of San Diego County Office of Education's Human Resources Department, and we work within the Teacher Effectiveness and Preparation team. Now, our team supports districts and educators across San Diego County and actually across the state. And one of our roles is around supporting teacher recruitment. And so that's why we are here today, because we um, try to do as much support as we can around recruitment. So again, welcome. My name is Shive Jones. I'm the Director of Teacher Effectiveness and Preparation, and we have with us.
Hi, my name is Adina Sullivan Marlowe, and I love working for this team.
And Adina has been a huge support in putting together, actually, she is the brains behind the operation around putting together all these webinars. So if you've been to this presentation or our previous presentations, we like to start off with just a little bit of who we are. Basically, the San Diego County Office of Education supports all the districts in San Diego County, along with all the charter schools in the county, and also collaborates with the community college districts around the county. We also collaborate with all the universities around the county here. Our objective for you today is to make sure that you just feel comfortable with preparing for a successful interview experience, whether it's in person or online. I'm going to pause for a second and just say, please, at any time, if you have questions, feel free to type in the chat and ask your questions. And at the very end, we will also have some time to do a Q&A session, and I'll stop the recording if anyone wanted to come off of mute and ask their questions. So talking about the teacher job market, it's actually not discouraging. There was a time when teachers were being pink slipped and getting their layoff notices. But right now we're really in a teacher shortage situation. And even when you hear about pink slips and layoff notices, what you may not hear is that those are also sometimes recalled and people are brought back. So here's what the needs are specifically for the teacher job market. We have STEM areas, special education, charter schools, and bilingual education. These are really high need, hard to fill areas. And it's important that I bring that up because when they're hard to fill areas, if you're flexible, like if you have a multiple subject or a single subject credential and you'd be willing to become a special ed teacher and go back to school, districts would be willing to possibly bring you on as an intern in those hard to fill areas while you teach under an intern credential. We also know with the educator job market that there have been a large number of retirements and resignations for a multitude of reasons, which is another reason why we're in the shortage situation that we are, along with the fact that enrollment in university teacher prep programs have been down for years as a result actually of the last time there was layoffs many years ago. That was a little discouraging for folks, and so I think it just put people off from wanting to enter into the teaching profession, and then we had people also leave to go out of state. I do want to mention that this is the teacher job market, but we also have a high need for non-teaching positions as well. And I thought I had a slide here, but I don't see it. So know that there's also a great need for non-teaching positions like health technician, um, positions in the business office, school psychologist, school nurse, campus supervisors. So there are other needs as well. So, hiring process, I think it's pretty simple. The paper gets you an interview. So, hopefully, you've gone through the EdJoin webinar. If you haven't, I would highly recommend that you do. But the paper gets you the interview gets you the job, and then your performance keeps you employed. So, really important that we're mindful, not just in how we present ourselves in an interview, but across this whole continuum from our application to getting the job to our performance. Application needs to be really accurate. I have seen um, it, situations where an application was not accurate, and even though a person may have done a great job in an interview and was offered the job offer was rescinded. So be really mindful of that. So, with the hiring process, you submit an application, the district recruitment team conducts the paper screening. They put together an interview team. So, sometimes you'll notice when you apply for a position, there's a little bit of time before you ever hear back from the district. And it's because they're doing the paper screening and putting together an interview panel. And then the applicant is notified of an interview, and then an interview is conducted by a panel. So panel interview is pretty normal for teaching and teaching positions, and depending on the non-teaching position, if anyone is going into a non-teaching position, it's also normal. And then an applicant receives an offer of employment or an invitation for a second interview, again, depending on the position. So let's really dive into the interview. I can give you a little scenario here. You're invited to an interview tomorrow morning, and need to think about, what am I going to do to prepare? What are you going to wear? What time will you arrive? What will you bring with you? And what will you do right after the interview? So let's talk about that. Yesterday talked a little bit about what to do to prepare for the job fair, and you'll find that there are some similarities here. You want to learn as much as you can about the district. And the reason being is because that information that you learn from doing your research about the district, you may be able to start making connections when you answer interview questions to some of your experience and be able to speak to what you know about the district. Arrive early. Doesn't matter if it's an in-person interview or a virtual interview, arrive early. In-person interview, you might hit traffic. There may be issues getting to the place for the interview. And then virtual, you always want to make sure that you have time to just work out any of your technical issues before um, the interview starts. If it is a virtual interview, I would recommend using a microphone or a headset because this allows the sound to be more focused and it doesn't pick up outside sound so much. Dress professionally. Okay, so for men, that may be a suit and tie. For a woman, it may be a nice top and a blazer, or a skirt suit, or just a suit, pantsuit. I'm a pantsuit person myself. So dress professionally, relax and be confident. Research shows this is true biologically. When our heart rate goes up and we're really nervous, it starts to dim our cognition. So try to relax as much as you can and breathe. Really important. And in the interview, be honest and sincere. As much as this is an interview of you, you're also you want to be as sincere as possible because you want to make sure that it's a good fit as well. And so if you're sincere and you're not a good fit for the district, that's okay too. Okay. Listen carefully and answer the questions that are asked. So sometimes when we're nervous, we may go off on a tangent and not really answer the question. And depending on if the interview panel is, well, oftentimes they are. I know in our interviews, we actually score responses. And so the response is scored lower if the interview question is not answered. And talk about students and instruction. Even if you're going for a non-teaching position, every single one of us have an impact on students, and our jobs are about our students. Okay. So what to expect? This is specifically for a teaching interview, um, possible or management or yeah, teaching or management position. There may possibly be a presentation, a writing prompt, or both. Usually the presentation, you're given a prompt in advance so that you could do a presentation, put together a presentation before you come in. And then when you come in, you're asked to do a writing prompt. Okay. Expect to see an interview panel anywhere from 2 to 10 people, depending on the district. And the interview questions are typically provided during the interview. So for instance, in our shop, if you arrive to the interview early, first of all, we allow the candidates to look over the interview questions. But once you go into the interview room, there's usually the list of questions in front of you. If this is virtual, not so much. So you may need to just have your listening skills ready to go for the interview. Now, when it comes to answering questions, backing up here, it's okay to have a notepad with you to jot down some questions if you need to, or just jot down any ideas or just words as they're asking you questions. So it's okay to bring a notepad with you if that helps. And you just want to ask the panel, do you mind if I have a notepad? And they'll let you know. So answering the question, develop the answers in your head before you respond. It's okay to take 2 seconds to think a little bit and process before it actually comes out. If you don't answer a question, if you don't understand a question, remember I said earlier that we do a point system and we'll mark it down if the question isn't answered. So if you don't understand a question, it's okay to ask for it to be repeated or clarified. There's nothing wrong with doing that. And you don't have to rush, but you also don't want to appear indecisive. And answer the questions as directly as possible. Um, you know, it could be a situation where you're going into an interview and they've already interviewed 3 or 4 people that day, or it could be that you're the first person being interviewed that day. What you want to do is make sure that you get to the point and really answer the question concisely yet thoroughly, because you just don't. everyone only has so much of an attention span, right? So you want to make sure that you capture the panel's attention and attention span to the best of your abilities. So the way to do that is to make sure that you're answering those questions concisely. And what I would recommend with that is start with a short answer so that you get their attention and then you go into details. So, for instance, if someone asks me a question like, what is your classroom management plan? I would start with saying, my management really focuses on what's best for students. That's a short answer. And then I would go into detail, either with an explanation or I would go into an example. I think having a few examples in mind, and we're going to share with you some sample interview questions, just having some examples in mind before you even go into an interview would be great. And then you can fit those examples into your responses. So let's talk about common interview questions. Um, and T here stands for teaching and NT is non-teaching. So depending on if you're interviewing for a teaching position or non-teaching position, these are some of the questions that you may see. And we are going to provide you with a copy of this PowerPoint, so don't feel like you have to write everything down if that's kind of stressful. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Why are you the best candidate for this school or district? And what I would say, well, I'll give the advice later, but we'll just go through these. Why do you want to be a teacher or in the school, or a psychologist in the school or in this district, a nurse in this district? So fill in the blank. Describe an instructional strategy that you recently utilized. And in general, I would say it would be good to come into an interview with one or two innovative strategies that you think would be worth talking about, that you're proud of, and maybe having an example. Describe your classroom management system. What are your areas of greatest strength and weakness? I've had a few HR folks or people who have sat on interview panels say, you know, I wish when people would talk about their strengths and their weaknesses, they wouldn't make their strength and weakness be the same thing. Um, what I would say is it's okay to talk about a real weakness, and then or area of growth would be a better way of describing it, and then actually address what you're doing. So to address that area of growth or that weakness. So for instance, it could be that I'm coming straight out of a teacher preparation program. And so my weakness or my area of growth is that I have been in a classroom situation for only 8 weeks or for 12 weeks or 16 weeks versus somebody else who maybe has a few years of teaching experience. But one of the ways that I've already been working on that is trying to get out there and do as many classroom observations as I can so that I can really understand um, um, just the different strategies and different types of scenarios that can crop up into a classroom. Other common interview questions, maybe how do you assess student learning? How would you communicate with students' parents or families or guardians? Is there 8 and 9, or I'm sorry, 9 and 10 actually, it's usually one or the other. Is there anything you'd like to tell us that hasn't come up in this interview? Or do you have any questions for us? we're going to talk about number 9 here for a second. If there are things that you wanted to make sure that you really wanted the panel to know that didn't come out in your responses to any of the other questions, now is the time to talk about it. Okay. And then do you have any other questions for us? So and looks like I did a little, I don't know what with oh, here we go. Yeah. And then describe a time when you worked toward a common goal as part of a team. What was the outcome? So and we'll talk about number 10 in a moment, but with number 11, and actually with all of these are common interview questions. I think if you come up with some ideas on how you would respond to these questions, there's a really, really good chance that there are going to be very similar questions that the responses you come up with may fit with a little bit of an adjustment. So if you just practice your responses for these questions, it would be really great preparation. So some things to think about. I thought I actually had it here. Nope, I don't. Okay, so let's go back to number 10. Do you have any questions for us? Some of the things that you could ask would be, well, first of all, do not ask a question that you could have researched before you ever came to the interview. So if there's information that you could have gained about the district prior to coming into the interview, here it is. Then don't ask. But you could ask things like, what's the next step in the process? When can I expect to hear from you? Or will I have access to an induction program? So for anyone who has a preliminary credential, they will need to go through, most likely, if you're out of state, the requirements may be a little different, but if you have a preliminary credential, you will need to go through an induction program. So this is an important question to ask. It may impact your decision on whether or not you decide to accept employment, or it may impact your planning in terms of knowing whether or not you need to figure out which induction program to be part of, or whether the district will provide one for you. So backing up, some things to think about as you're answering questions is the academic, social, and emotional impact on all students. All students. So think about your English learners, your students with special needs, students who are coming to you with different backgrounds, different cultures, different experiences. Students who are dealing with gender issues. These are all things that fall into all students, and we need to make sure that when we respond to questions that we convey that we're really thinking about all of our students. And that is what the interview panel wants to see and hear. And it's really what, as an administrator, I want to look for in a teacher who's going to join my team, or any staff member who's going to join my team. I want to know that they're sensitive to all students. Okay. And then another thing to think about is that now we have in-person teaching, we may have online teaching, there's hybrid environments. Who knows what's going to happen, because things are constantly changing. And also, who knows if we'll ever go back to 100% in person in certain situations. It could be that there's always going to be options for students. So think about and be prepared for addressing any questions that have to do with utilizing instructional technology, or how might you do something in a hybrid environment versus an in-person environment versus 100% online. Okay. And then reaching towards the end here, I want to highlight substitute teaching. I know I mentioned this in yesterday's presentation if you were there yesterday, but substitute teaching is really a great way to have a district get to know you a little bit, have a school get to know you a little bit. It's like auditioning for a teaching position. So it's something to think about. And there is a huge shortage of substitute teachers across the country, across the state, and definitely across San Diego County. If you decide to substitute teach, you would apply to each district individually. There is in the North County Coast, I think they do a consortium, but most districts you apply to them individually. When you are subbing, go above and beyond because you want to make a good impression. And believe you me, when I say the kids tell their teachers everything. So if the substitute teacher snapped at somebody, or if they made a rude comment about their teacher, the kids will come back and tell the teacher. So just go above and beyond. Take the time to meet the secretary because he or she is the heart of the school. Leave a detailed note for the teacher. Keep it factual. Yes, and the custodian. That's true. Secretary and the custodian are the heart of the school. And then follow the instructional plan. Be prepared if there's no plan, because that may happen. And ask another teacher if you're not sure if there's a plan or where the plan is. And always clean the room before you leave. If I come in the next day and my room is a mess, that tells me that there may have been some classroom management issues. So, and we do offer substitute teacher training and recruitment events twice a year if that is something that you're interested in. Okay. My final tip would be a couple final tips actually. Right after the interview, jot down the names of all the people you could remember who were in the interview panel and send them thank you notes. You never know, even if that position doesn't work out, you never know if there's a position down the line that you want to apply to. It is a very, very, very small world. I can't emphasize that enough. So anything you can do to make a good impression is important. Send those thank you notes. And then feel free to provide a link with your portfolio if you have one, or sample lessons, sample student work, either a link or maybe you bring some copies with you. What I will say is that with in-person interviews, that sometimes it's hard to stick with the schedule. And so when someone offers their portfolio as a member of the interview panel, you feel bad, but you don't have time to review those things. But there may be something that you want to pull out to share as you're responding to a question. And I would say usually that would be a student work sample, and that's fine to do. I think those are my final two tips. Adina, do you have? I know you probably have some tips.
One that Shive didn't mention, and it served me well in the last time I interviewed for a position. If they call you and say, hey, I know you were scheduled for X time, could you come in at this other time instead? Say yes and make it work if you possibly can. I found out after I was hired that the person who was responsible for all those, that's what they remembered about me, is that I was flexible enough to completely change my time. It was like 7 a.m. or something like that. And I said, yep, sure, no problem. I rearranged everything else. That's what he remembered about me. And it served me very well. So be flexible if you can. And if they ask you if you want to interview for a position that was not the one you were considering, say yes and interview for it. Trust me, that's how I got my first teaching position in a district. It was not the job I wanted. It was a grade level I said I would not teach. I did not want to teach. That's what got me the position in, and then I got to go where I wanted to go. If they ask if you want to interview, take the interview.
That's a good one, Adina. And actually, now that you mention that, I didn't get the job, the teaching position I interviewed for, but the principal called me and offered me another position. So I have math and English, and I interviewed for a math position, but they offered me part math, part English, and I took it. And the next year I got all math and then kind of worked my way in fully into the math department. That's a good one. So that concludes this presentation. This is our contact information. If you leave today's webinar and a question pops up, or you have an interview scheduled in a couple weeks and you just have a question, please feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to talk you through anything there. I'm going to stop the recording, and if anyone, all of a sudden I've lost the memory on how to, oh, here.